account that has write access to this. So I know a number of people are here today to talk about Slack moderation. Would we rather walk through the board first and then talk about Slack moderation at the end, or invert the order? Steering members. I feel like I'd rather go through our board first, if that's okay.
Please.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, and I see Brian has also entered the room. Okay, so let me, can I even click the link? Doesn't seem to be a link that works for me, but I'll copy and paste it into a new URI and then share my screen and we'll all be happy. You're gonna have to deal with my love of dark mode GitHub. Let's see, desktop 2. Okay, blow it up a little bit. That's a little too much. This is what's on the steering committee project board. We apparently don't have anything blocked waiting. So the first thing on the in progress column is a PR by Phil to talk about updating the steering committee charter. Phil, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I just moved it into blocked waiting now, I guess. I'm required some LGTMs on this thing. This is a PR that I revisited. I think Michelle and you, Tim was asking for some feedback around something. I think this requires 3/4 approval from the steering committee because it's an update to our charter, even though it's pretty minor.
Yeah, the point I wanted to make there on the feedback for the charter was we've been having these side conversations about what responsibilities or asks we want to make from the CNCF. And I was wondering whether or not we wanted to make that explicit given some of the issues we had with moderation and what roles they might play in that type of work.
So I guess I would put it this way. I don't want to, typically iterating on charters takes a long time. I don't want to lock that down in stone in this charter. I think I'd rather sort out, are we the sole conduit for requests of the CNCF, or are there other SIGs that can request support directly from the CNCF? I believe the CNCF's response would be like, anybody can file a service desk ticket. But when it comes to asking for things that require funding, does that lie solely with the steering committee?
So as long as the steering committee gets notified, and I believe we do if a service desk issue gets filed, then I'm fine with it if it's under a certain amount. And so in the early days, I asked for a single conduit because funding was very limited and it was super confusing with people just going directly to Dan. There was no such notification mechanism, but if there is an automated notification mechanism, then we could say, like, if it's less than some reasonable amount, go ahead and file a service desk ticket. Otherwise, please run it first.
Okay. I feel like this is relatively uncontroversial and we can take it offline.
Or take it online.
Or more LGTMs there, yeah. Questions around charter scope specifics are probably what?
This is addressed by the last.
Right, yeah, that's what I figured. Okay.
And sorry, Aaron, you said the plan is just to defer that question and follow up with it, right?
Yeah, my plan was to defer that. Or we could take what Brian said and turn it into words and put it in there. Your call.
Tim, are you okay with deferring it?
I don't have strong opinions. I was looking for feedback from other folks, so.
Okay.
I'm okay deferring it.
By defer, what do you mean? Make the word change and then LGTM after that?
No. I mean,
I am okay with
outlining
merge as is, right?
Yes, merge as is, iterate on future requests of the CNCF and articulate.
Okay, merge as is. I'm good with that.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm fine with that also. I'll just throw a proposal out there though. If it's less than $5,000 and it's requested through a service desk ticket, just file a service desk ticket.
it doesn't even need to be part of the charter.
Yeah, that doesn't need to be part of the charter. That's an operational
Right.
document somewhere.
And I'll write it up as a separate PR and drop it in the same directory.
Okay.
Yeah. On a related note, the service desk stuff does seem to go into a void, like we found out today, Brandon and Brendan.
Well, maybe it depends. So some service desk stuff has changed. I tried to log in and my Atlassian account no longer works.
Okay.
So I usually don't try emailing the service desk. So I don't know what's up with that. But in the past, logging in to file or review open tickets has worked for me.
Worked in the past. Okay.
I've only emailed, and I've had that work as well.
Okay. Next up, we have rationalized governance, SIG governance, and committee steering governance.
Which Paris is doing.
You are working on this. Do you have any updates for us?
Sorry. Yes, I submitted a PR. Phil actually made a ton of comments, mostly formatting stuff, but there is a PR in flight right now that dedupes all the governance stuff, actually sunsets one of the files because the file had nothing left after copy and pasting it other places into other homes. And then it also created a SIG and working group checklist, which takes the logistic pieces out of the policy. So like the stuff the contributor experience directly touches and influences essentially. So I created that as well. Let me get the link to that.
I think I just found it. I will post the link here.
Okay.
Does 3287 sound familiar? Deduping gov docs?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Cool. All right, let's all take a look at that in due time. Brandon, would you like to talk to us about creating the product security committee?
Yeah, we're just doing all the legwork to make it happen now. So creating the repos and adding things to the community repo. All the PRs are up at the moment, just waiting for review. So it's all fine.
Okay, cool. Michelle's not here. Does anybody know where we are on auditing, cleaning up working groups, sort of rationalizing against what our definition of working group is?
There's Paris's PR, which I think has more information about disbanding and creating them, but this is looking at the existing ones, right?
Yeah, I believe this is about going through, maybe this is the checklist here. There are some working groups out there that seem like they're stale or maybe seem like they don't actually fit the definition of working group. And so we were going to rationalize them into whatever it is they need to be that a sub-project of the SIG, retired due to inactivity, or turned into a user group, given the definition that we created for those.
Yeah, so I think big data is the one in flight that's being converted to
User group, right?
user group. Yeah.
Okay.
George is saying there are two more that need to be closed down.
AppDef and container identity.
Yeah, I shut down the AppDef mailing list, but that's the only thing I did on that one.
Okay. Sounds like that's still in flight, but we're not exactly blocked on anything.
This is Derek. I had a question. So we had, I think, Paris, you and I had talked on this prior, but we are discussing in like the resource management work group about also shutting down or pausing our activities in favor of just working within SIG-Node properly now. But I think one of the things we were looking for is like, and I apologize if this was done, how do I want to describe this? A document describing like the body of work that came from that group, and or a template to explain like what the group did, what it set out to do, what it did, and what it accomplished, and why it's now pausing or disbanding. Did a PR get posted for what that like kind of retrospective document would look like, or if not, I'm happy to do that. But I think that'd be a useful thing to do as working groups come and go, to kind of like have a standard template to describe the body of work that was produced.
That sounds good.
That sounds like,
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. And then in the community repo, we should have like maybe an archive directory for the.
There's one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so in fact, what you just said, the sections you just said, Derek, sound awesome. And that could either just go in the charter document or a separate document. It went to the SIGs folder, and that we're moving the whole folders to the archive subdirectory.
I can include that as a step for the SIG working group lifecycle doc that was just checked into under the section for working groups as something that's to be expected.
Yeah, I'm happy to define the template or guinea pig a template, but I would find this to be a good exercise for us to do moving forward.
Yep.
Okay. Feel like that may be related to the document, what working groups are. I will take tying this to Paris's work offline. 3 more, then we can get to the open discussion. Charter's meta issue. So not every SIG has a charter that has been fully reviewed and approved by the steering committee. We have SIG docs that's open.
Nope, SIG docs is closed. Actually, there's a spreadsheet as well. And I went through the spreadsheet and checked all the PRs and the allo were merged. So everything's green or white, but some of them say follow up.
Okay. I know, so SIG PM, I was in their meeting recently and they're talking about redoing their charter. SIG Big Data, we talked about how that's changing to something else. And then all of the cloud providers, Azure, GCP, OpenStack, we're punting this in favor of merging them all into a single SIG called SIG Cloud Provider, right? You don't have to talk about the details of that, but I just want to make sure that was plan of record.
Yeah, that's still the plan of record.
So we should add a row to that Excel sheet.
They're working on a proposal. They have a very long document on that front.
Okay.
And you know how I said no one wanted to help drive that to fruition?
Yeah, there is a SIG cloud provider already.
Yes.
Perfect.
I'll help step in there in the next, not this quarter, the next quarter.
So by the way, I did get a version of the image that shows all the SIGs, the diagram checked in. There's no link to it anywhere. If someone wants to suggest a doc, like go ahead and drop the image into some doc somewhere in the community repo.
What image is that so I can show us?
That is the SIG diagram PNG. Sorry, go back.
That one.
That one. So that had, I updated it several times during discussions, like the resource management working group is still here, but if that shuts down, I'll update this. Ditto for container identity. Big data, I already converted to a user group. Some of the other working groups like AppDef were already pruned.
Brian, this is for anybody on the call, right? They can, we would welcome somebody.
Absolutely.
Yes, please.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I just didn't, in the PR, I discussed a couple different options. Neither of them seemed ideal. I just wanted to get the diagram checked in while we figure out the best place to put it. But like the SIGs list, and we could embed it into the header for the generated SIGs list doc, but the diagram would push off the SIGs list off the first page in most browsers or places to view. So I didn't know if we wanted to put it there, but or with where we discussed the different types of groups, we could put it there. But anyway, I mean, somebody else can figure out and suggest a place and send a PR with the image embedded.
Okay. Oh, I love spreadsheets so much. Okay, formalized sub-projects. I think this is the same thing where there's some goop that needs to be done that I would rather just punt to discussion of contributor experience unless anybody here is chomping at the bit to talk about this right now.
I would chomp at the bit to say if anyone on this call wants to help, I would a lot of people would really appreciate it, so we get those deets filled out inside of the sigs.yaml.
There are probably a number of PRs pending that Nikita has implemented recently around some of this stuff. I know she helped implement the user groups functionality, and it would be awesome if people wanted to help review her work.
And how would they find that?
That's a good question. I'm going to guess, let's do it live. If I go to Kubernetes community pull requests, and if I look for things that have label committee steering, these may be some of the PRs. Add user groups to README, add support for user groups, are at least 2 of them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We could probably add an area for all PRs that touch the metadata generator. Okay, I have scrubbed through everything and blocked and in progress. Is there anything in backlog that we would like to discuss today, or would we like to move on to open discussion?
We have that one issue, right? The Slack. Is that what you mean, open discussion?
That's what I mean by open discussion. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that. So I will stop sharing the screen. And going back to the meeting notes. So Paris and George have a topic called Kubernetes Slack. Add more moderator guidelines and issue templates. See all communication related docs here. Would you like to summarize what's going on and why we're talking about Slack here?
Jace and Noah are actually going to lead that combo. I don't know which one's going to take it first.
Jace, are you online? I don't.
Yeah, I'm here. But okay. Go ahead and take it, Noah, and you can maybe fill in about the user community.
Your name is still SIG Architecture.
We're the same thing anymore.
Okay. So as an update, me and Jace, on the behalf of the Slack admin team, have met with the CNCF end user community to try and figure out what the general feeling from that group was about how to cope with the ongoing questions of what is the scope of the Kubernetes Slack and how should we deal with moderation in order to make sure that our Slack complies with our code of conduct. The general gist of that was we don't feel like we're going to be able to get enough end user moderators to make code of conduct compliant moderation of the end user areas of our Slack a viable option forever. In the extreme short term, we've got lots of people that would love to help, but they're all people that are coming from the Contribex side and that are already heavily overloaded. And we don't have a pipeline for getting new end users that are trusted enough to be Slack admins. We're very concerned that we don't have a good way to accomplish that and that we can't guarantee that we're not just going to keep burning people out as moderators. We can try to augment our human moderators with some level of automation, but Jace feels strongly, and I feel a little bit less strongly, that automation can only go so far, and that without a source of humans to provide that energy on the end user community side, we don't know how we're going to manage the end user community in Slack. And as such, we have a posted recommendation that we remove end users from the Slack. Begrudgingly, I am not a fan of this. I don't think Jace is either, but we don't really have a great solution here.
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
If I
would also add, as a final point, automation comes up as the de facto answer for this, and automation immediately initiates a whole new realm of technical debt that somebody has to manage and guide, and has to be responsive to undocumented APIs on the Slack side, and et cetera, et cetera. So unless somebody's really going to say, I'm going to own this, and I've got 7 people that I'm going to train up on this tool and all that, and have that level of commitment, I'm very reluctant to entertain that as an option, just as a general rule.
Why isn't this a response?
Okay, so I'd want to introduce a hand-raising thing. I got Tim, then I got Brandon.
Why is this not a responsibility for all of CNCF, seeing how they're the sponsor that got us the Slack in the first place? Why can't we moderate or offload that to them, seeing how they're loaded for bear with cache?
CNCF does not. Oops, sorry.
Yep.
CNCF doesn't offer moderators to their communities. They only offer relatively tightly scoped support. So, for instance, if we produced a design doc for this automated moderation tool that doesn't exist, they could help that exist. They could help pay for that, but they don't really have a good way. I have asked Cheryl to look into if the CNCF can incentivize member companies, be that money, be that promoting them as sponsors. That then we could sort of delegate this to end user companies and say, hey, can some of you find some of your employees that are willing to help out in your duties as CNCF end user members? But suffice to say, I'm not super confident in that as an ongoing management strategy.
I think we need to bring pressure to bear, both from the CNCF onto Slack itself. That's my opinion.
Oh, so I totally agree to a certain extent, but I think that we just architecturally speaking are past the use case of what Slack can handle. It's intended to be a private tool, not a public tool, and that CNCF is willing to double down on support for Discuss, which we've already accepted as a project and have implemented. So I feel like they have plenty of really solid answers why devoting more humans and pouring an endless stream of humans into Slack moderation is not a good investment, nor is it actually keep the community that safe regardless. So they're pretty clear about that.
I should also add that there are some concerns, even with both a heavy automated and human moderator presence. There are elements of Slack that cannot be made to comply with the code of conduct in an effective manner. I'm happy to discuss those in a less public setting with any of the steering committee that would like more information on that. But it's not going to get probably any worse than it already was, but the code of conduct is what it is. And our role as admins is supposed to be to make that happen. And even though I believe more strongly than Jace that automation will help a good deal, I begrudgingly admit that even with good automated modules on Slack, I don't think that I can make it fully comply with the code of conduct.
Brandon.
So the reason for removing the general public is because there's some sort of way of us enforcing like maintainers via email address to joining Slack. Like what's the plan for essentially having like trusted users?
Roughly speaking, the previous Slack inviter tool was a public tool called Slackin. We would basically remove all existing users or deactivate them and let people re-register using a new inviter tool that uses GitHub OAuth and checks that all users are. We could come up with whatever rules we wanted to, whether you're a member of the Kubernetes organization, if we want to allow in other ecosystem project maintainers, but something like that. I should state we're also not completely certain we can do even that.
Sorry, could you say that last part again? I didn't quite catch that, Noah.
We're not completely the plan of deactivate all existing users and allow people to re-register. I'm only about 80% sure that we can even do that much. Slack doesn't. The APIs for activating and deactivating users are undocumented and unsupported by Slack, but so is the user invite API. So this is not new. So yeah, the backup plan would be to literally shutter the existing Slack and make a new one, which would be highly disruptive to SIG operations. I don't really like that plan.
Okay.
I want to look at this doomsday scenario a little bit more. I don't really like it in the sense that that's the set of people that we need to tap into. And I want to hear from Jace how we can limit the damage if we end up pulling the plug one way or another.
Well, I think the plan, the deprecation of the user side of the Slack can take time, and we can have an orderly migration in the sense that we identify where we want people to move to, we explain why it's important, and that part of it is manageable. there's other prior art around these sort of migrations. And we can certainly talk to other communities that have undergone similar transitions and learn what the pitfalls are. I think that this is so hard because there's a lot of ambient noise. But this it's hard because I as somebody who's been on the Slack almost since day one, I recognize the value it brings, and people, the more. I just want to frame things this way, and forgive me for being a little slow here, but there's an easy opportunity to jump to this being radical and the response to a few bad actors and don't let them spoil the pie, etc. But what I see as more radical is you have 3 people right now dedicated to managing 60,000 people, and that's pretty bad. And if you still, let's say we scroll that up to 30 people, that's still 2,000 people per one person. So I feel like I think we kind of need to be like rational about the risks here in terms of human risks, and understand that our community is adaptable and flexible, and that we can, if we work with them and are transparent and honest, I think they'll respond mostly in kind, and the people who don't are the people that we're trying to exclude anyway. So, and not exclude in the sense we don't want them in the community, but we're trying to avoid people being overtly negative or breaking the code of conduct. And so it's tricky, but it's important.
If I can just jump the queue a little bit as another administrator perspective, I am also very concerned that all of those things that Jay said are absolutely true. I do not disagree with any of them, but they will not necessarily be solved by Discourse as a tool. Discourse, we are actually, as a license, limited to 6 top-level admins. So we actually can't have more than that right now, even if we had more volunteers.
Oh, has anyone talked to
Josh? Could you wait your turn?
Okay.
Joe, you're up next.
Yeah, so I think one of the core problems here is that we don't have a centralized system for keeping track of project members. So even if we, like that whole issue around having people check in, log into Slack with their GitHub, we still have to have this idea of like, who is a member? And I think one of the ways that we can fight abuse is actually have stable pseudonyms for people interacting with the community. We can relate those to email. We can make sure that there's a nomination sort of vetting process so that we can actually have a trust network going on here. And so I think it is reasonable for us to act, the CNCF is not going to actually provide moderation, but providing essentially a project user database type of system that can then integrate with these things could be a critical tool to help us get a handle on these problems. And that is something that I think we could ask the CNCF to actually fund building out. So this is, I'm just trying to think, how do we get to the root of this issue? Because even if, I think, one of the things that I think came up recently is that we did have somebody who was, banned from Slack rejoin under a different name. And so this would be a way for us to start attacking this. And this is a problem we're going to have regardless of whether it's Discourse or Slack or whatever. So just wondering if that's something that we've thought about.
Sorry, Joe. Don't we already have like processes for sponsorship to add to the Kubernetes org?
Right, but I think,
are we talking about?
I mean, so we have that process to add people to the Kubernetes org, but are synchronizing that with Slack, synchronizing that, we can use GitHub as a source of record here. Now, one of the problems with using GitHub as a source of record is that there's no provision for private information. So one of the other problems we have, and this comes into play when we're doing elections, is that we don't have, like GitHub username to email mapping, and we don't have a way to store that in a private way for users. And so that's another piece of the puzzle here that we don't have. So, maybe that's a place where we start with is that GitHub, org membership. But we do need to have something as a source of truth that we can synchronize across a whole bunch of different properties.
So it's tough for me to talk about this and also kind of moderate the discussion because I'm like super passionate about all that Slack has enabled. I feel like it's one of the core cultural pillars of this project. So I experience a certain amount of frustration when we talk about segregating the community or the impossibility of maintaining this thing that has gotten us thus far. So I do really appreciate everybody's effort. I understand that it's complicated. But so, number one, if we segregate users away from contributors, I feel like it's going to perpetuate the myth that this is an echo chamber of a community, and it's going to be even harder to get contributor attention. I know you know that. I know you don't like it, but let's acknowledge that that is a decision we would have to make. Number two, I feel like what I have heard from folks thus far is that a chat room is inherently difficult to impossible to moderate according to our code of conduct. That thus far we have gotten by with like the state of things as they have been is that we've been unable to effectively moderate our code of conduct or enforce our code of conduct on Slack. And so one option is we could, as a community, decide whether or not we are okay with that. I think that what I have heard loudly and clearly from Jace and members of the Code of Conduct Committee is that safety comes above literally everything else in terms of priorities. That it is unacceptable that the community is willing to accept some amount of noise in the name of continuing the culture that has gotten us here. And then the third thing is, like, I really appreciate Jace's and Noah's and Paris's and the Slack moderator's perspective as having been on the front lines, so to speak. But to me, having a ratio of trying to handpick 30 people out of 60,000 people does seem like it should be conceivably doable. I feel as though up until yesterday, when documents were PR'd in about the moderation policies and how one could become a moderator, that the opportunity for the community to step up and help out didn't really exist. And so I feel that it is somewhat unfair to say, let's not even bother trying when we haven't even attempted to try. But I understand that it is a difficult and complicated situation. I just feel like, to me, one thing that should be on the table is to understand if and how we as a community would be willing to go forward as the way things were, openly acknowledging the risks that that entails. Okay, I said a lot and I kind of stopped paying attention. So I think Paris was up after me, unless anybody wants to respond to that.
Yeah, if I can jump in with a thing. First off, on changing the code of conduct or how we enforce that, as an admin, I serve the code of conduct committee, so I will adhere to whatever that group or any other official organization within Kubernetes says. I don't have a strong opinion, but I will say the same thing that I said on the CNCF call, that I feel the visceral we are overreacting sense as well, but I feel like a lot of that comes from positions of privilege and power and knowing that I am not marginalized within this community, and that therefore minor drive-by harassment is unlikely to have a substantial effect on me other than making me cranky for the day. But it's not going to force me out of the project. It's not going to make me doubt my life choices. But we have people that are not like that. And again, I defer to the Code of Conduct Committee, but as an admin, I see it as my responsibility to protect those people by enforcing the Code of Conduct. That is one thing. The other is, I forget. I am sorry. So I will shut up now.
I think for me, it's the broader question of, I heard you say something like switching to discourse wouldn't necessarily solve some of the risks we have in front of us either. And like, okay, hey, the people who are like, Slack is terrible, let's go to IRC. Please present me a set of tools that will allow us to enforce the code of conduct there just as effectively as we enforce it here, right? So is there any platform that would offer us the kind of cultural capability that Slack does, the kind of chat room stuff that we want, but would also be enforceable according to our code of conduct? But okay, Paris.
So I feel like everybody's optimum solution here is for us to keep Slack for both consumers and contributors, which I also want to agree with as well, because I do think that what Aaron is saying is accurate and how it has been I would actually say one of the leading contributing factors to the success of this project. You can get real-time information on a subject that people say is hard as anything that they've had to learn in a long time. But with that stated, there is a lot of stuff that's going on in the background that people on this call don't know about over the course of at least the last 18 months that I've been an administrator with this project. And being an administrator, like what Noah is saying, you do serve the code of conduct, meaning you do have to be aggressive to people. You do have to shepherd. There are skills involved with this. And for us, that means we're going to have to ask at least 10 to 20 people to have this type of behavior and do it on behalf of both the consumers as well as the contributors. And right now, this whole entire scope is leaning on the contributors who could be working on projects like mentoring and succession plans for this project. And they are not. They are now going and laying themselves on the line to keep Slack. So I think there's a lot of hardcore decisions that need to be made here. And also people are being targeted as well. So I want to keep Slack. I did an emoji talk at KubeCon on Slack. So like I feel like I hear all of the sides and have actually been on the front line and also been targeted. So I have several biases here. But I will present the facts to you that we have at least 9,000 weekly active people on this, 250 channels, and people can be targeted at everyone exploit via Slack, and Slack will not confirm that either. So there's also other proprietary things that are, we deal with from dealing with proprietary software that we also have to take into consideration here as well. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Okay, Josh, you're up to explain discourse stuff. This is especially useful in the context of the chat where people are suggesting how could we empower the community to do moderation without making them full-on admins.
Yeah, and discourse is ways to do that, but I would like to give my slot over to George, who is our senior discourse admin and can explain this more succinctly.
George is on an airplane and cannot speak.
Okay. Well, in that case, I will speak for George. So the thing is, unlike Slack, discourse has varying levels of administration. You can be a moderator for just a forum. You can have certain moderator powers, but not others. We can also do things like limit the number of posts that somebody can make right after they join, or add other limitations on new members. There's a bunch of moderation tools sort of built into discourse to make our job easier, both in terms of doing the actual moderation and in terms of being able to recruit more moderators because the requirements are not as stringent.
If I can also jump in with an addendum to that as an admin, there is nothing stopping a similar set of tools existing for Slack in the abstract. I have a document I've been working on with a design spec for this, but as Jay said, Slack does not themselves support this. We would have to design and build and maintain that tool. In my optimal pretty world, other communities would also help us maintain it, but there's a risk that it would be a piece of tech debt specifically for us, and we're already stretched pretty thin. I think that is an area that CNCF could help with making money appear to, like, if we can give them a good enough design doc, they could contract someone to build and maintain the tool, but it doesn't exist now.
Okay, I think Derek, you're up next.
Yeah, so of course, a number of useful comments, I think, from Brian are in the chat that I kind of wanted to echo, but I think the general statement on no one has to today appear to agree to the code of conduct before joining Slack is a salient one. It's not clear to me that the the situations that have occurred, that the actors who actually did the bad actions would have even cared about the presence of a code of conduct or agreeing to it. That if we put these processes in place, does it actually have the impact that you'd look for? Because the actors don't care to begin with, right? Like, rude people are rude. And so I just kind of want to balance that with some of the stuff that Aaron was suggesting. Just personally, I think Slack is a key part of project success at this point. Like, we had been on IRC in the beginning of the project. We moved to Slack. Slack, as my history, has had better opportunities for developers and maintainers on the project to interact directly with users, that I'm not sure if we put too many barriers of entry to let that communication happen, that they would actually happen. But with that, I'll defer the comments to others who might want to speak about particular incidents and their impacts.
So I wanted to make a couple of comments. One is, I think it's really important that we separate our response to and what action we take in response to malicious actions, like the most recent issue, to Derek's point. Like, I think that's pure defense, right? We just have to get the API controls in a place where people who can't, easily spin up anonymous accounts and can't spin up new accounts in response to people banning existing anonymous accounts. I think that's a separate problem, and a pretty small, it has high impact but small scale, right? Like, this is the first time that I know of that this has happened here. It happened on Zoom once. It's a pretty rare event. I think the other question is the more general, like, what is the level of discourse in our forums? And that's one where I would have to effectively defer to the Code of Conduct Committee. I'd like to see us be data driven there and say, like, do we actually have a Code of Conduct problem in our forums in Slack right now? I just don't know. And I'm not sure.
In our forums or in our Slack?
Sorry, I mean in
Slack. Yes, we do. I mean, I can categorically say that because we have had incidents.
Sure, we had someone impersonating a Microsoft employee.
We have incidents. Sure, what I'm saying is, do we have the actual data? Right? Do we have
what data would you like to be made available?
Rate.
I think there's a difference between lawbreakers and lawlessness, right? And
right, exactly.
Lawlessness.
And that's exactly my point, is that, like, some of the comments have to do with, oh, we can't scale to X number of people or whatever. I think the vector of scaling is actually number of incidents, not number of people, because ideally these things are socially correcting and we set the right social norms to begin with, and people are self-correcting.
As an admin, that's not how the Code of Conduct is written.
It doesn't matter. I'm talking about practical, like, the most immediate example of us having a problem are very different than the sort of day-to-day friction that would drive people from a community. And I think we should view them differently. One is a pure defense. We need to build a better fence. That doesn't, more moderators isn't going to help with that. Like, putting 30 moderators or 60 moderators or 1,000 moderators on our Slack, or having better moderation tools, isn't going to help us prevent what happened, right? Better defenses will prevent what happened. But then the second part of this is the question of, do we have a systematic problem? Do we have lawlessness in Derek's phrasing? And that's one where I simply have not seen any data one way or the other. And I think it's important that we have that data before we start making decisions. I would also say that I am very sympathetic to Paris's notion that Slack is not exactly motivated to help us here with the APIs. And I can also sympathize with the notion that we should move simply to have better control over the APIs. And I think, having been present for the IRC to Slack move, I have very little doubt that the community will continue to be strong no matter what medium we choose to coordinate on.
Would anybody from the Slack admins team like to respond to that before I move on?
I guess I can just continue as an admin, the Code of Conduct does not contain a segment saying that a certain number of incidents are expected or permissible. And as such, my enforcement is global and absolute. And I appreciate that that is unrealistic, but that is the standard to which I feel I should be held as an admin.
No, and I agree that that is the standard you should be held to. What I'm wondering is how many actual incidents do we have?
Hundreds. If you want to, like the number of people who have been banned, I'm going to guess hundreds, but I don't know.
Yeah, and rate. So not just number, not just absolute number, but rate, right? Like if we said, hey, you know what, the policy is someone reports it, or we try and find automated tools to report it, and a moderator looks at the history and decides whether or not to ban the person. Like, I just have no notion if that's sustainable with 10 people or with 30 people or with 100 people. Like, I have yet to see the data that would allow us to figure that out. So I guess what I'm saying is the problem. I want to make sure that we focus on solving two different problems. This conversation happened because of a security incident, effectively, right? Let's go solve the security problem. But it has prompted a broader conversation about, are we set up to do this correctly, and is the Slack discussion area healthy? And if we're going to have that conversation, I think we need better data.
Which security incident are you referring to?
Someone breaking in and
no one broke in. All of the users from all of the attacks so far have registered via normal channels.
No, I know that, but they registered they registered with malicious intent.
Sure,
it is a security incident. The fact that we had the door open is part of the problem, but it is a security incident.
I would not characterize it as such, in that the charter of the Slack so far has been anyone of the public can register for any reason.
So we have limited time.
It's important to make a difference between these people had no intention to be part of the community. It's important to separate things that, whether we should raise a higher bar about how we make sure people are part of the community, the trust network that Joe is talking about, from how do we prevent malicious actors from entering our community.
I'm going to cut this off in favor of letting Paris continue. We have limited time.
More moderators was actually a thing well before this incident. So I set an issue, like ironically enough, 2 weeks before the incident and said, oh my gosh, we need help, because I was the only one on holiday duty responsible for a platform of 60,000 people for an entire week. And we get at least 10 requests a week, if not a day. And it's a lot of work. And it needs to be around the clock. So the issue at stand is we need people to help us full time. And unfortunately, we do not have that at this time. So that's one, there is a staffing issue. And then two, there is a community safety issue. Okay. So, and I can, and as a code of conduct committee member, I can say that we are talking about transparency reporting with moderation being included. And the reason why we have not done any kind of transparency reporting to date is because as an admin, we have wanted the Code of Conduct Committee to lead this effort. So we are happy to report on anything that this committee or anybody in the community would require from us. And I can definitely tell you that it's at least probably one a week. That would be concerning. So.
Okay, Joe, and then Phil, and we have 5 minutes left, so be mindful.
I mean, I'd love to see us break this down into something actionable, because I feel like we're going around in circles here. It seems like, you know, well, I mean, so it's clear that something has got to change. I think we're all agreed on that. I think one of the, there's the question of like, do we actually severely lock down or restrict Slack? Will that actually get us where we want to go? Do we do some of that, plus also perhaps some of the sort of restrict who can register and start to actually dial that back based on some sort of trust? I think one of the things that would be interesting, and we probably don't have the data, but if we could run an experiment where we look at the bans, the actions that we have to take with respect to moderation, look at how long those people have been Slack members, what their activity level is. My gut here is that people who have been active members of the community that then cross the threshold where we need, that's probably pretty rare, versus people who show up just to grief out of pretty much nowhere. And so I feel like if that's my gut, and if we can actually sort of eliminate the the low quality users who didn't come here to actually participate, that might actually knock this back down to something that's more manageable. That seems actionable to me, and it seems like the type of thing where we can throw systems at it and make some progress.
Okay, Phil, and for what it's worth, I agree with Paris. One thing I'm interested in is understanding how we can continue this conversation, because it's not going to resolve here or Contribex. But Phil.
I was just going to say that. Like, where do we take the discussion here, and who's leading it? Sounds like Jace. Jace, are you?
This is why I feel like it's out of scope of contributor experience. I mean, we've blown out with consumers at this point. So it's like we're kind of holding on to this because of the contributor base and because I think we need it so much. So it's like,
this feels like a good, I mean, I hate to be the one to bring in a CAP, but this feels like the sort of thing that actually could be well discussed in a CAP proposal.
A little bit. I just again, emotional appeal, so I apologize if I'm not being logical here. I feel as though there is stonewalling from the mods who are like, I've been there, I've tried, trust me, it's not going to work. Let me save you from yourselves. And I feel like that is potentially disingenuous to the energy of community members who are willing to suggest things like automation to maybe make things better, or staff up the moderation team to maybe make things better. And I feel like it needs to be an ongoing conversation in a forum. If it's not Contribex, I'm not sure where, because it feels like it's going to take some time to resolve. I'm happy to spin up.
I guess to Joe's point, I think that if we do it as a KEP, then we will actually have practical action items. Like how do we reopen the doors to Slack and secure it? That's a practical thing we need to solve soon, right?
The most critical need we have right now is that we have 3 people moderating Slack at this moment.
So
Eva's out, Paris is out, it's me and Noah and George.
Sure. So let's staff that up to 10 and let's lock down the doors and Slack.
That to me is stopping the immediate need. There's the most urgent need is just to get people involved as moderators, like instantly.
Yeah. So let's do that.
Christoph, you get the last word, then we're done.
The only comment I wanted to make is like to continue the plea from Contribex is like this has kind of blown the scope of our SIG. And to just reiterate that point, like there isn't the manpower in Contribex right now, or the person power I should say in Contribex, to like carry this torch. We can do that for our contributor base, but we're having problems making the decisions and being able to carry the torch of this conversation forward for the 60,000-ish users of the Slack. It's causing a real issue, and we need that support. Like we need to have a forum to continue that, whether it's a KEP, whether it's something else as far as the next steps. We need a forum to have that conversation. And is steering taking this over? Like that would be my question.
Working group is a time-bounded effort. This seems like it would go on forever. I feel like let's have an email thread on the steering mailing list. Jace and Noah, since you are the two who I think expressed the opinions that kicked off a bunch of fun conversation in contributor experience, can you start an email thread there? It sounds like your initial ask is, could we please have some more people to staff up the moderation staff while we figure out what our next steps are, and we can find a way to fork off a separate recurring group of people who are interested in this and call it whatever we need to call it. Does that seem fair to everybody?
Yep, that's fine. Noah and I will work on the thing.
Okay. Thank you everybody for your very thoughtful and thorough discussion on this matter. Steering committee is the greatest. You know you want to run for steering committee. Elections are in October. Come on, it's fun. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I think that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thanks.